Here are two Mitsubishi Minicab trucks. One of them has a timing belt that can snap and destroy the engine if you ignore it. The other has no belt at all. Nothing to replace, ever. Because it's actually a Suzuki Carry wearing a Mitsubishi badge. Take a second. Which one's older? Here's the answer. The one with the timing belt is the older one. It comes down entirely to one date, February 2014. Here's the dividing line, and it's sharper than most people realize. Until February 2014, Mitsubishi built the Minicab. Truck themselves, with their own engines. The U61T and U62T generation uses the 3G83, and it uses a timing belt. From February 2014 onward, everything changed. Mitsubishi stopped building the truck themselves. Every Minicab truck since, with the exception of the EV version, has actually been a Suzuki Carry, built by Suzuki, wearing a Mitsubishi badge, and the Suzuki-sourced engine that came with it. The R06A uses a timing chain instead. No scheduled replacement interval in the way a belt has one, so the practical rule is simple pre-2014. Minicab truck, budget for a timing belt. 2014 or later, you're driving what's mechanically a Suzuki Carry, chain-driven, and everything we've already covered about the Carry in this series applies directly to your truck. Here's a detail worth knowing. If you're shopping specifically for this generation, the model code tells you the drivetrain the same way it does on the He-Jet. U61T means rear-wheel drive. U62T means part-time 4WD. This particular generation launched in January 1999 and, aside from a couple of minor facelifts along the way, ran essentially unchanged for a remarkable 15 years, all the way up to that February 2014 Suzuki switch. Every single one of those U61T and U62T trucks from 1999 through early 2014 is a timing belt engine. There's no exception hiding in there. Here's why the timing matters for American buyers specifically. This U61T, U62T generation started clearing the 25-year import rule back in 1999 plus 25, meaning the earliest examples are already legally importable today. And because the same body ran essentially unchanged until 2014, more of this generation keeps crossing that 25-year line every year. Between now and roughly 2039, a full decade and a half of steadily expanding import eligibility, all of it needing that same timing belt check. Quick origin note, since it explains why this nameplate has stuck around so long. Mitsubishi celebrated the Minicab Truck's 40th anniversary with a special edition back in 2006, which puts its actual birth year at 1966. That's roughly 60 years of history under one name. Genuinely one of the oldest key nameplates still in production in Japan, even after Mitsubishi handed the keys to Suzuki in 2014. If you've got one of the older Mitsubishi-built trucks, here's what you actually need to know. Mitsubishi's own FAQ specifies replacement. Every 100,000 kilometers with shorter intervals, recommended under severe conditions. Real owner records tend to show similar mileage. One detailed logged replacement on a U61, U62 generation truck was done at roughly 8,500 kilometers, and the truck was still running well, past 200,000 kilometers on that same belt system, by the time of a second replacement. Here's proof this isn't a hypothetical warning. One real owner posted about exactly this scenario, their 3G83-powered Minicab. Hit 100,000 kilometers and the timing belt actually snapped right there, followed by the very real fear of engine damage that comes with it. That's not a worst-case scenario pulled from a textbook. That's a documented real-world account on this exact engine, at almost exactly the mileage we just talked about. One more quirk specific to the 3G83 while we're on the subject. Mechanics who work on these regularly warn that it's genuinely prone to overheating. Mitsubishi itself issued an official caution about this. Get the coolant air bleeding process wrong during any cooling system service, specifically skipping the cylinder block, drain plug step, and trapped air can cause the engine to overheat. Worth mentioning to whoever services yours, timing belt or not. Here's what that job actually looks like, based on real documented work. It's not a quick fix. One owner's write-up walked through draining the coolant first, jacking the truck up on all four corners, because so much of the work happens from underneath, removing the crank pulley and then working through the water. Pump and belt tensioner, alongside the belt itself, because on most engines, if you're already in there for the belt, replacing the water pump and tensioner at the same time just makes sense. It's a multi-hour job, not a 5-minute swap. And here's what that repair actually costs in real terms. The belt itself isn't the expensive part. It's a relatively inexpensive component on its own. The real cost is labor, since the timing. Components sit at the front of the engine, and reaching them means real disassembly work. And in practice, most shops recommend replacing the water pump at the same time. Since you're already in there, all-in belt, labor, and a new water pump budget roughly 100,000 yen. That's the realistic number to plan around, not the price of the belt alone. Now some quick history, because the Minicab story explains why this OEM switch happened at all. Mitsubishi eventually stepped back from building their own K trucks entirely. Once you know that, the 2014 switch to Suzuki-built engines isn't surprising. It's just Mitsubishi following the same path. Toyota and Subaru took with the Hijet, badge engineering, a truck built by someone else, rather than keeping their own factory running for a shrinking niche. That matters for parts and service too. Once you're in 2014 or later territory, you're not just getting a Carry's engine, you're getting a Carry's entire parts ecosystem behind it. Every fix, every specification, everything we've already confirmed about Suzuki, Carry reliability in this series, applies to your Minicab truck as well, because underneath the badge, it genuinely is one. Worth being specific about the risk if you get this wrong. A snapped timing belt on an interference engine, meaning the pistons. And valves occupy the same space at different points in the rotation. Doesn't just stall the truck. It can bend valves, damage pistons, and turn a routine maintenance item you skipped into major engine damage. That's true of belt-driven engines generally, not something unique to Mitsubishi. But it's exactly why this is worth checking before you buy. Not after something breaks on the highway. One naming note before we wrap up, because Minicab alone can get confusing. Mitsubishi uses that name across an entire family, the Minicab Truck. We've been discussing a separate Minicab van for cargo use, and passenger versions sold under different names. Entirely Bravo, and later Townbox. Same underlying platform, different bodies, different registration categories. If you're searching listings, make sure you're specifically looking at Minicab Truck, not just Minicab, or you'll end up comparing apples to cargo vans. So here's the buyer's checklist, plain and simple. First, find the production date, not just the model year on paper, but the actual build date. Since the February 2014 changeover happened mid-cycle, not neatly at a calendar year boundary. Second, if it's pre-2014, ask directly for timing. Belt replacement records, and don't take, "It's never needed one." As a good sign, it usually means it's overdue. Third, if it's 2014 or later, relax on the belt question entirely, and instead pay attention to everything else. We've already covered about the Suzuki Carry, because that's what you're actually buying. One small thing worth knowing if you're new to this channel. I cover the real-world details about Japanese key trucks that you won't find in a typical spec sheet. Engine codes, model years, the stuff that actually determines what you're buying. If that's useful to you, subscribing means you catch the next one. The Minicab Truck isn't one truck with one answer. It's two completely different mechanical stories wearing the same badge, split cleanly down the middle by a single month in 2014. Know which side of that line your truck falls on, and everything else about buying one gets a lot simpler.